Teachers of Reddit, what is the most shocking thing you've heard from a student? Story 1. I got a call from a student telling me that B was missing, and they were going to start searching on the outskirts of town. She'd gone running and hadn't come home. We all met in her neighborhood and divided into search teams. A couple hours later, we got the call to meet a central location. The same kid who had called walked over to me and told me they had found her body. It was one of my saddest experiences as a teacher. I had to call each kid in our class of 18 and tell them the news. Story 2. I was walking a kid, 9-year-old, out to student pickup. And out of the blue, he says, "I like my new daddy better than my old daddy." "Oh," I said, "why is that?" "Because my old daddy tried to eliminate my mom, and also me, but it's okay. He's in jail now, and my new daddy is much nicer." Title I schools, man. Answer. And that is part of why I teach high school. I teach at an urban core Title I school. We hear stuff like that more often than I like, but hearing it from a 16-year-old sucks and is sad, depending on the kid, even heartbreaking. Hearing it from a little kid, that would just rip my soul out. They haven't even had a chance to live at all, and this is what they think is normal. Story 3. While student teaching, I had one of my dramatic juniors drop a bomb on me. "I'm pregnant." I asked her if this is good news or bad news. She told me it's good news as the dad is 21, going to help raise the kid, and that he loves her. Taking her words as such, I asked her what he does for a job. Her reply, "He deals substances, but only Xanax." She ended our conversation by asking that I wouldn't tell her parents as she hadn't told them yet. Yep, sounded like some good news to me. Story 4. A few years ago, we had a kid in our district commit tragic end. He was at the magnet school, so a lot of the kids in my class had grown up with him, lived near him, and knew him quite well despite not going to school with him. We got the news the night it happened. We came in early the next day to have a meeting. We had to figure out a way to explain to our kids that an 11-year-old boy was so sad he decided the only option was to eliminate himself. Honesty is the best policy, so after calling parents and getting the okay, we talked to all our kids together during our first period. For the most part, they handled it with maturity and empathy. The discussion turned to how we can help our friends and what signs to look for when someone is sad. One of my kids said, "You can't tell. You can never tell." I couldn't tell with my dad until he was gone. I found out from a counselor that my student had found his father after the man eliminated himself with a gunshot to the head. Answer. I suppose it's true you can't tell with some people, but while growing up, I experienced counselors and teachers constantly ignoring or berating tragic end, depressed, or bullied kids. It feels like people being genuinely scared of kids committing tragic end, and schools getting flack for it, didn't become bigger until maybe less than 10 years ago. I still didn't see a huge difference when I did research in schools 5 years ago, but I see more support now. Story 5. It seems I had been given a nickname, Cholo, so I would hear that word every now and then during class, but I never thought they would be referring to me until I noticed I was hearing that word with every single group of students I was teaching. Eventually, I heard a student saying, "Cholo sucks." I put him on spot until he confessed he was referring to me. Story 6. Student once told me, "Do you realize I could eliminate you and chop your body in a million little pieces and bury you in the desert?" 6 months later, he ended up eliminating a police officer. Edit, I have some people questioning whether or not this is true, so I've included this link. Story 7. 2 preschoolers in my class were arguing over a marker. Girl who got the marker snatched out of her hand by a little boy says, "I wasn't done with that yet. Give it back, and you can have it when I'm done." I was so incredibly proud of my student trying to problem solve that the boy's response, "You as a problem to God," was completely unexpected. Story 8. If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead now. S was tragic in the day before, had a plan and everything. I was in the hall at the end of the day and stopped to chat with her. We talked for about 10 minutes about her day, and then she walked away. Nothing out of the ordinary. It turns out that conversation was enough to give her reason to live one more day. We talked every day about basically nothing to keep her going until we could get her help. I'll never forget her face or the look she gave me when she said that. I cried like a baby too. Answer, wow, this hit me hard. In high school, I struggled with depression and didn't go to class for a while. My teachers all knew, but the one teacher I had who was the most understanding was my band conductor. My mom would call her every other day to talk to her about how I was doing, and she was genuinely concerned for me. The day I told her I was dropping band, she was very kind and told me to focus on getting better. She didn't push me into staying, didn't tell me to join the next year, nothing. Just wanted me to get it better. I was never to the extent of your student, but it was great having someone who understood. On behalf of your student, thank you. Story 9. My sister is a K-2 special ed teacher. Her specialty is ED, which is emotionally disturbed kids. One second-grade girl would tell my sister almost daily that she would eliminate her, which was chilling, but not as chilling as the fact she would draw how she'd do it when given art supplies. Story 10. First day as elementary guidance counselor, walking a second grader to my office to talk to her BC teacher, says she won't pay attention. As we're walking, I ask, if you could have 3 wishes, what would they be? She said, I wish my daddy didn't go away. I wish that lady didn't get shot dead next door last night. And I wish I could get upgraded so my mama's car wouldn't get possessed. I knew I really couldn't counsel her into paying attention anytime soon. So I just took her to my office and let her draw me pictures for a while and talk about whatever she felt like sharing. Story 11. Professor here. 1. Girl gave a speech in class about how at 18 a Marine bought her 13 shots of tequila. She'd never had a drink in her life. She told her violation story. It was powerful and heartbreaking. She was a virgin. And she said no one besides the police and her mom knew the story. And she thanked us for listening. Said she wanted to tell someone and felt comfortable in my speech class. Ended by giving all the girls in my class advice on being careful at parties. 2. About once a semester, a dumbass freshman will announce in class, yeah, I pay your salary. That never goes well. Story 12. Preschool teacher here. My favorite overheard conversation took place in the bathroom, a very busy place considering it's almost nap time and 2 classrooms are filtering through it. 2 teachers, 40-something children. A couple kids still wear diapers at nap, and I was helping them get them on, so I didn't hear how this conversation started. At some point, out of my eyesight around the corner, I heard, no, under your butt. What is that? I turn and look. Little Nora is in a full squat, hands on her knees, little pigtails and chipmunk cheeks fully engrossed on Owen's genitals with his underoos around his ankles. He does not respond. She continues, is that a pinky? 'Cause I have them on my hands and on my feet. You got one on your butt. You got a butt pinky. A goddamn butt pinky. Look at a 3-year-old's male body part and tell me that isn't the most apt fudge thing you've ever heard. Story 13. I teach ESL. I had a cute, petite Japanese woman as a student once. She told us about her first trip outside of Japan to Malaysia or Philippines or some Southeast Asian country I forget now. She was walking down the street and some people in a van tried to talk to her, but she ignored them because she didn't know them. She told me she was very polite to them, but they kept trying to get her into the van and told her they would be her friend. Then they tried to grab her, but at that moment her friends arrived and the van drove off. She was very confused as to why the people in the van wanted her to get into it and wanted to be her friend. I just stared at her and was thinking, girl, you almost got kidnapped into intimacy slavery. She didn't seem to realize. Story 14. I teach at a Title I school district, urban core, poor neighborhood. I hear stuff all the time that I probably should regard as shocking, but honestly, I guess I've grown accustomed to it. A couple of examples that come to mind. Juniors, 16 to 17, that are pregnant with their second kid. Homelessness? I guess I come across as someone easy to open up to because they launch into full-out stories about where they have been staying, friends, family, cars, bus stops, just roaming until morning when they can come to school, how they have been getting by. Thank God for Title I schools receiving free breakfast, lunch, and dinner. With students getting shot, one of my students is going to be released from the hospital in a few days. Another of my students is his sister. He was in ICU for several days following a shooting. Endless cursing at anyone and everyone for anything. Example. Me, good morning. Student, fudge you meanie, you don't know me. Get out of my fudge face. While this is not something I've heard, but rather seen. Girl fights. Horribly violent and bloody girl fights. They will rip chunks of hair out of people's scalps with skin still attached. They will gouge people's faces with their nails. And they do not care if you are the person they are fighting or a teacher cop trying to break them up. They will keep fighting that way. Edited for formatting. Answer, I went to an alternative high school. It was made for teen parents, students who'd been expelled from their regular high schools, and students with learning disabilities. I fell into the last category. Anyways, girls were fudge vicious there, especially the pregnant ones. The only fights in my 2 years there were girls. A girl once punched a hole through the principal's office wall. She was aiming for another girl's face, but she dodged. Story 15. Worked in a school with 90 Aboriginal kids, Northwest Western Australia. First day of term, my first posting, back in the 70s. Year 1s and 2s, primary school, took the roll. 70-80 of children absent. A child comes in late. He fronts up to my desk. I ask him his name. He vomits all over the desk, the roll, everything. A huge, loud chunder. Burping, vomiting, groaning. All I can smell is adult beverage. He has been drinking all night. Same school, coaching the softball team. Year 6 and 7 girls, all Aboriginals. There's a dispute. There's always a dispute. I intervene. One of the girls says she'll smash my head in with the bat if I don't fall off. She means it. At the time, the town has one of the highest homicide rates per capita in Australia. Story 16. My first year teaching, I had the high schoolers sharing some personal writing, very freedom writers. Kids were encouraged to write from the heart, etc. We'd all sit in a circle and share. This girl goes into this story about how her boyfriend got her blackout tipsy, then videotaped him and his friends taking advantage of her. As she reads this out loud to the class, I'm only thinking about my responsibilities as a mandatory reporter. My job's on the line if I don't take stuff like this to a counselor immediately. Then she goes on to explain how the boyfriend woke her up and made her watch the video of her getting violation. She calls up an ex who comes over and shoots the guy in the male body part. After she shares this masterpiece, I search for clues that this is all in the past, something she's told others before, and all these psychos have been locked up. She just goes, nope, and makes it seem like this is the first time she's told anyone. I take her writing to a counselor. The next week I get called into a meeting for her. I'm expecting this long report about intimacy abuse, mental stability and stuff, but her dad just wanted to make sure her grades were okay. Story 17. I caught 2 year 8 students, both still 12 years old, passing a note. One girl was giving advice to her friend about the blowjob she was apparently giving her boyfriend that weekend. The level of detail this girl gave was impressive yet terrifying for a child to know. I didn't know what a blowjob was at that age, let alone know the benefits of a finger or two up the arse. Needless to say, that was passed up to the child protection team. Sadly, no one was surprised when the expert gave birth age 15, same age her mother was when she was born. Story 18. I didn't hear this, but it's more of what the student did. I'm a special education teacher. We have students use a reflection room for escalated behaviors. It's basically a mat-padded room for when students become aggressive. One student went in there and tried to hang himself on the door handle using his shoelace. Teacher stopped him for obvious reasons, but he was so fast at tying the shoestring around his neck and onto the door handle. Poor kid was a 4th grader. He's fine, but I mean, how does a 4th grader even think of doing that? So sad. Story 19. I used to teach in a super fudge-up inner-city school. In my first tier of teaching, I overheard one of my 2nd graders say, "Don't drop the soap." I interjected and said, "You shouldn't say that. You don't know what that means." Usually, I wouldn't tell a kid what he or she does or doesn't know. I sure did hope a 7-year-old did not know what that meant, though. Next thing I know, my 2nd grader is cracking up and cheerfully saying, "Duh, Miss S, that means you'll get butt violation if you're in jail." He was not trying to be defiant at all. He seemed surprised it was inappropriate and perhaps may have wondered if I knew what it meant. Definitely realized how fudged that community was at that point. No childhoods at all for those kids. He was a sweet boy. I hope he is doing well. Story 20. I had a student write me a letter. She clearly had a crush on me, but I really brushed it off as nothing as much of a childhood crush. Her letters began to get more and more intimate. One of them entailed using scientific equations and how, like science, we should have chemistry and create new elements. I put that letter forever away so I wouldn't have to go to jail. Story 21. The NSPCA, National Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and Social Services came around last night. The NSPCA took the dog, saying the house wasn't fit for life. Social Services took my 7-year-old sister, but left me, girl age 12. All the 12-year-old wanted to know was when they would get the dogs back and why the house was too filthy for her sister, but not her. Edit. Sadly, I have dozens of these stories. Story 22. The police had come in to do the DARE thing for our kids. They had a glass-fronted case that contained all kinds of substances and paraphernalia. One of the darlings from my class raised his hands when they asked the kids if they knew what they were showing them. He ran up and said, "That's a joint. I know, BC. My daddy tells me to leave him alone when he smokes his." That was awkward. Story 23. My first day as a teacher was a half day spent registering the pupils. After registration, the pupils sat until the buses arrived to take them home. I became responsible for a classroom that began each day with about 30 boys and girls who were 15 years old. To give my charges something to do on the first day, I asked them to complete anonymously a page of questions. One of my questions was, "What qualities do you like in a teacher?" One pupil wrote, "I like a teacher who tells jokes." Another pupil wrote, "I like a teacher who is kind." One pupil answered my question with, "A good teacher is a dead teacher." To the chagrin of somebody, I decided to begin with being kind. Story 24. My cat's name is Forehead. Human Centipede is my favorite movie, both said from a sweet sixth-grade girl. Before working at a school, I worked at a teen treatment center, and the most shocking thing a kid told me there was, "Do you like my painting?" She was smearing poop across the wall in swirls. Story 25. A girl I dated a few years back was a special ed teacher. She would often ask her students what they had for dinner the previous night, since many came from broken homes, and she wanted to make sure the kids were being fed. When she asked one boy what he ate the night before, he replied, Rex. Rex was their pet iguana. The child's sister, not learning disabled, confirmed the story. Story 26. One of my students told me her son has a bad smell coming from his room. She finally figured it was under his bed, coffee tins full of his urine. He had several. Who knows how long they had been there. He was about 8. She was also late one day because son was peeing on the family dog. She says this like it is a comical anecdote, not realizing how screwed up it was. Answer, my younger brother did this, and I just couldn't understand why he did it. We're a middle-class Asian family, and we've lived a good life growing up. My parents weren't as hard on us on education as long as we were average to above average. My other siblings and I graduated as average students, but my younger brother dropped out of high school and started collecting his urine in water bottles and leaving them in his room. I just can't seem to understand why. Story 27. I'm tipsy and feel like sharing this story. When I was a senior in high school, I was committed to slacking off because who gives a shoot about high school, right? I took a class called Teen Leadership, which involved about 25 of us, grades 9 to 12, just talking about random self-esteem boosting types of stuff while sitting on couches. Anyway, we do this assignment halfway through the semester where we write a one-page, double-spaced summary of ourselves. This Korean exchange student girl stands up as the last to present and gives a speech in broken English that essentially distills down to all my life. My father has told me that I shouldn't bother going to school because I'm useless and too stupid to learn. Turns out she financed her own trip to the States to go out on her own and educate herself away from her atrocious father. She actually taught herself all the English she knew. She started crying so hard that she couldn't finish her speech. Being the edgy piece of shoot teenager I was at the time, I acted indifferent. But to this day, her predicament brings me to tears because at the time, I'd never been so close to such a devastating tragedy like that. Answer, had someone in HS that reminds me of this. His English wasn't good and he was bullied a bit. One time during class, he confronts his bullies about how they will never know what it's like to escape hell, war-torn Serbia, and proceeded to name off some horrible things while in tears. Shoot. I swear those guys would have crawled into a hole that day if they could. Story 28. Not really a teacher, but I did have a free period one year and happened to be a teacher's aide. Overheard some small snippets of conversation regarding guns and bombs and stuff. Totally blew it off, assuming the kids were just talking about some video games or something. Now, these were kind of off-the-wall type kids, trenchcoat mafia members through and through, so I decided to listen in on their next conversation a little bit closer. I hear some more stuff along the lines of, yeah, if you get them all in the lunchroom, you can take them all out really easily. I corner one of them after class and confront him, and this kid freaks the fudge out. He starts talking like an auctioneer, getting words off as fast as possible. Apparently, they weren't talking about take down an entire school, just zombie apocalypse survival techniques. It's good I didn't get some real staff involved, or this would have to have been posted in Tifu. Story 29. Not a teacher, but my son's first grade teacher called me to tell that he told a friend, people are just like Smarties. They all look different, but once you've got the skin off, they taste basically the same. Apparently, she was taking a sip of coffee when he said it and sprayed it all over the class. Story 30. Took some inner city kids from the roughest part of our city on a trip to an affluent upstate NY town where they stayed with families. They were doted on and taken care of like they'd never seen. One evening, 2 of them were watching TV. The older one, 10, smacked the younger one, 7, and took the remote away. The younger one said nothing and waited. The family they were staying with had 2 large dogs that the older student was deathly afraid of. Early the next morning, the younger student snuck into the older student's room and hid dog treats under the covers of his bed while he was sleeping, and then let the dogs into his room. The older student flipped out as the dogs went crazy looking for the treats. When the host family told me about it, I approached the younger student and we had a chat about how appropriate it was to set dogs on other people. His response? He's just lucky I didn't put any treats on his neck. Story 31. Not exactly a teacher, but I worked at a camp. 2 10-year-old girls were walking behind me and the dab, dance, was brought up. One girl goes, "You shouldn't talk about that. Do you know what it means?" Then she says, "Dabbing is where you mix up a whole bunch of different substances, put them in a bowl and smoke it." I just kept walking and pretended not to hear. Story 32. A kindergartner, age 5 or so, is walking down the hallway with his teacher. The little boy slaps the teacher's jerk. She stops, turns to him and says, "Did you just hit me on the butt?" And the boy goes, "Yeah, I tapped that booty," with a big smile on his face. I didn't know whether to laugh or be terrified. Story 33. I'm not a teacher, but as another student, I overheard this. So important details are. This girl I went to school with, I'll call her Meanie. Her uncle, I think her mom's half her stepbrother, was a teacher there, a really young guy. She wasn't in his class, though. She was a fudge slag cunt, but he was really cool. This conversation was with her friend Sarah, who was really a sweet girl, but at the time wanted more friends instead of good friends. It went as follows. "Meanie, I told him what is going to happen if he doesn't help me. Now he's saying he won't help me. But Daddy will believe me. My mom probably will too. My dad would beat the shoot out of him if I tell him." Sarah, "Okay, but Mr. is your uncle, and if you say he fudged you in exchange for whatever, then your dad might literally eliminate him. Then your dad gets in trouble too. Plus, not only that, the school will find out. He will lose his job, go to prison, and be on the intimacy offender list for the rest of his life." Meanie, well then he should help me. Isn't that what family is for? If he won't be considered family, then he should do this for me. He has the connections to do it, but he wants to be in jerk. He thinks I can't do anything about it, but I can, and I will if I need to. Sarah, but you don't need to do that. I can help you if, Meanie. So what would do though? Really? What am I supposed to do, Sarah? Sarah, I don't know. It just seems like a really bad idea. It seems really mean. This could really hurt you too. Meanie, well, I didn't ask your opinion, did I? You're always so judgmental. Sarah, I never judge you. I am always on your side, but this is just wrong, and it's going to backfire. Meanie scoffs and walks away. So after I heard this, I immediately went to have the most awkward conversation with the principal, and she brought in this teacher so that I could have the conversation with him present too. For the time, I totally regretted saying anything because of how embarrassed it made me feel, repeating these things to my favorite teacher, who was a guy, about his niece, and I felt like shoot because I thought for sure he wouldn't believe me and I would have to see him every day. But he did. He thanked me for snitching because it made her claims less credible. They called her parents and she got transferred to another school. He tried to be cool to me from then on by making good grades easier to obtain for me, but was not as fun to be around because he was really cautious of the girls from then on, even though he was pretty much in the clear as it was established that his niece was a lying bitch slut. Like he wouldn't even high-five female students anymore, and if he was in the hall with a girl alone, he would start walking faster. I heard from Sarah that the girl's parents were so fudge pissed that they sent her to an all-girls Catholic school. But she blamed Sarah for telling, and they weren't friends anymore, just neighbors. Meanie got pregnant 2 months after getting to Catholic school. She wouldn't say who the father was. Edit, sorry about the length. It was not my intention to write a novel here. Story 34. Not a teacher, but was a student at the time. Went to class one day with the weather, they're reporting a tornado watch. Rumor and hope on campus was that it would get bad enough to cancel classes. Whatever school officials kept an eye on it, that morning deemed it safe for the rest of the day, just before lunch, much to the disappointment of the students looking forward to canceled classes. I'm standing in line for lunch at the student center, dimly aware of the disgruntled conversations around me, when I hear this girl exclaim, "What is this? Auschwitz?" Story 35. 4 of my kindergarten students had a speech contest in the city, so my director and I went along with them and their parents. After the speeches, we went to a coffee shop to await the scores. I sat with the kids at one table, the moms all sat at another table, and the dads all sat at a third table. Little Becky looked over at her dad, laughing with his friends, and said basically, "Oh no, are you drinking already?" She wouldn't believe him when he insisted he was drinking coffee. She had to go over there and smell it. We ended up having quite a bit to drink that afternoon, evening, and night to celebrate how well all the kids did. Becky's dad ended up passing out, and we had to call his wife, who had taken the kids home, to come get him. Story 36. My first year, I had a 13-year-old who was pregnant. What do you say when a child comes up to your desk and excitedly shows you her ultrasound picture? She told me the baby's father was in 8th grade, so not much older than she was. They ended up pulling her out of school at about 5 months along. I heard they did a news story on her when she had the baby because she was the youngest person to ever give birth in that town's hospital. Story 37. One of my favorite teachers told me a story about when he was teaching in one of the poorer schools in France. He said he saw that one student was staring at the window through the whole class and seemed completely inattentive. When the teacher asked him why he kept staring at the window, the boy replied, "I'm just thinking about hanging myself with the cord." Dark shoot from an elementary student. Story 38. I was a brand new high school teacher in a ghetto part of town. It was my first year teaching math, and I thought I could really make a difference. I was naive and thought that with enough patience and understanding, I could break through some of the kids and help them pass high school and maybe even to college. Well, I had a particularly troubled student. His name was Daniel. He was bullied because he was poor and gay. It broke my heart seeing him try to express himself artistically with his art and his clothes, because some shoot head bully would always tear his pages and rip them up. Nothing infuriated me more than seeing no one doing anything, and that no one cared besides myself. Even the principal didn't give a shoot. There was one day where he told me something I would never forget. It's okay if they pick on me or call me names. I know one day I'll be successful and that I'm beautiful. You remind me a lot of my dad. He always took time to ask about my day and beat the shoot out of me with a pair of jumper cables. Well, I'll see you next year. You've really helped me when no one would. Sadly, he didn't return the following school year, but I'll always remember you, Daniel. Story 39. Not a teacher, but my friend told me about this exchange she heard, where she is a lead teacher between a prec sub and a student. Kid, I need to go potty. Sub, why you going potty so much? You drink a lot of beer last night? Friend, Ms. Sub, you can't ask a student that. Sub, sorry, Coke. Did you drink a lot of Coke last night? Kid, nah, it was just water. Edit for formatting. Story 40. I had one kid hypnotize another in my class, for real. Students had tasks they were doing and were working quietly. I was helping a student out, talking over his work with him. Then I heard this boy say, "And sleep." The boy next to him instantly slumped down and his head fell forward, his eyes closed. I know what you're all thinking, load of rubbish, pretending, etc. But I promise you, this was real. No kid, no adult could act falling unconscious as well as that. Hypnotist kid looks worried. I shouted him, I still can't believe I found myself saying this in a classroom setting. For God's sake, wake him up. I can't remember what the kid did, but he said something. The other kid's head went right up, eyes open again, looking really dazed, like he's just been woken from a long sleep. Hypnotized kid remembered nothing but was really freaked out. So was I and my amateur hypnotist. Turned out this kid had been bought a book on hypnotism by Darren Brown and had been trying it out. I told all of them that we would never mention this again. 10 years in teaching, and I've never seen anything like that, to all DR. One kid hypnotized another in my class, for real. Story 41. I teach young people in a not-so-great area who, in my words, have failed to launch. In just the last week, I've had the following. A 16-year-old girl came to me with her problem. She is being blackmailed into doing intimacy favors for a 20-something guy she met online, who offered her money for videos of herself and another girl doing things. She said she thought it was real because he showed her the cash via Snapchat. She also said they were just fake doing stuff, but he now said he would post it all online unless she does what he says. Poor child. We went straight up to the police station. I also had the revelation one student is about to testify against her schizophrenic mother's ex-boyfriend who repeatedly abused her. This was only when she was back home from being farmed out to foster care. I also leaned my star student is living in a house with not enough resources for more than one bed, so she and her friend have to take turns sleeping. It's not really a level playing field sometimes. Story 42. I work at an English school in China. One girl had trouble pronouncing "it's a cat." Every time she tried to say it, it came out as "it's a cunt." She always spoke so loudly and chipper too. This was especially awkward in the open class where the parents sit in. Fortunately, the parents didn't pick up on it. Still made me cringe though. Story 43. We were discussing a novel where the main character's father had died in a workplace accident. We were discussing grief. One girl added to the conversation, "When my dad was eliminated, I felt sad, but now I'm getting better. My sister is still sad. I think because she saw him shot." This girl was 12 and her sister was 15. They were in Kenya and their home was robbed, and their father, the sister, and the youngest brother were kidnapped, and the father later taken down. I felt terrible for the family. They left Somalia and started a successful life in Kenya and had everything taken from them. Story 44. After 12 years in an inner-city school, a few things come to mind. Yesterday, when discussing the physical appearance of justice, I compared her to Lady Liberty in the Statue of Liberty. They were answering questions about justice in the courtroom. I asked one student, "Have you ever been to the Statue of Liberty?" Her response, "No, I'm not going all the way to Canada. I just stared. I teach in Connecticut." Whole class was in shock. Best part was when her friend came back from the bathroom and she asked him the question. He said, "Yeah, it's like on the border between New York and New Jersey. Isn't there some kind of issue about who owns it?" I had a junior who believed mermaids were real, thanks Discovery Channel. That took 10 minutes of convincing her otherwise. And my favorite story, in my second year of teaching, I was 25 and had seniors. One was 17 and very pregnant. After Christmas break, she came back very excited that she was getting married in a month to the father, who was a 30-year-old clerk at a deli. I looked dead at her in the eyes and said without thinking, "Wow, he is 30, I'm only 20. That is weird." I then realized it may come have out the wrong way. She got quiet. In that moment, I think she realized this wasn't normal. Story 45. This year, I trained to be a high school English teacher from April. I was placed in a school within an area of poverty and was told to be prepared to see some shoot behavior. As the school didn't have an employed drama teacher, English teachers were required to do 2 hours of it a week, even though we had no idea what we were doing, nor were we trained for it. After some Googling, I found a lesson plan that linked well with Macbeth, the Shakespeare play we were studying. The starter activity required the students to make a freeze frame on what it means to be a man. One student in particular got down on her hands and knees and started doing a push-up variation position. Another one of my 13-year-old students came over to her and told her, "That's a sick intimacy position. I only ever do it in the arse so I don't get pregnant." All the kids just looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I told her to go and wait outside until I had the chance to speak to her. Reported to safeguarding the second the lesson was over. She continued to tell me other stories thereon, such as how she couldn't wait for her boyfriend to get out of jail because she was gagging for a shagging. Her mom didn't want her as a toddler, so gave her up for adoption. She was a substances addict. The girl's sister fostered her but also doesn't want her really. There's no wonder she is the way she is. It's sad. Story 46. I am not a teacher. I am a parent with a 4-year-old son. My son just told me that one of his friend's father is dead. He got shot for some unknown reason, and his friend has 2 adult females as parents. I am in a relatively Catholic country, Philippines, so this may sound kind of normal in some country, but this surely made my eyes pop out a bit. Story 47. I used to teach English in Japan. Most of the kids were delightful and eager to learn. This one little shoot, though, he was really disruptive and rude. And though he was only like 7, he had learned a lot of English swear words. There's nothing like teaching a class of kids to say parts of the body and having the kid from The Grudge shout out, "Tits, cunt," and having to smile through it and ignore him. Story 48. One of my students, or 7 years old, was taking about how his uncle would never go back to Brazil. I asked why. He replied, when he went, he saw loads of shootings, like people just being shot in the head. Quickly shut the conversation down and wondered why his uncle had told him. Story 49. I used to teach refugees in Boston. One student from the Sudan told me that he and his family had hid underground in a bunker for 5 years. At another school, a 15-year-old girl told me she wanted me to be her boyfriend and tried to kiss me in the middle of the lobby. I turned my head, but she still got me on the cheek. Story 50. As a para, we had a student diagnosed with autism showing severe signs of schizophrenia. Took 4 years of constant documentation to get him the help he needed. His mother was a diagnosed paranoid schizo. So many days after work, my then coworker, mentor, current best friend, shared many a weeping session for that child. Kid would come in with bruises and have entire days switching personalities. I only saw 5, but apparently there were 7 wrong diagnoses or travesties, and they happen all the time. I've warned with 20 kids each for 3 hours a day, every day, and 2 of them were obviously under the wrong label. Story 51. I'm a student, and while in science class we were studying astronomy and talking about Big Bang, and this one girl goes on a 5-7-minute rant about how God created the universe and the Big Bang is fake. I'm not against religion or against people believing in theories that God created the universe, but I couldn't believe she brought this up in a science class. Edit. I know this isn't shocking, like a first grader saying fudge me in the private area, but it's all I have. Story 52. My mom had slot of stories being a high school counselor, but since I can't legally share any, I'll share what happened to me in 6th grade. I had a good friend, let's call her Jay, who had just moved to town the year before. Jay and I met first day of 6th grade and hit it off pretty well. Her dad was a cop, and she was really proud of him. She had a younger brother, and they all lived in a house in the middle of town. While we were all getting ready for our class camping trip, and Jay was super excited. Monday morning, I get to class and notice Jay isn't there. Once class starts, our teachers call us into the middle of the room and sit us down. They tell us Jay's dad last night eliminated their mother, dropped Jay, and her brother off at her grandparents', then suicides by cop. I can't imagine how hard that was to tell us. Jay was back later that week and went on the class trip, but we didn't see much of her after that. Story 53. Not me, but a friend who taught 7- and 8-year-olds. She taught in a city with a strong gang culture. 2 students, boy and girl, were bickering about something when the boy says, "I'm going to shove my male body part so far up your jerk, it will come out your mouth. Watch what you say around your kids, people." Story 54. Okay, I'm not a teacher, but this is the most messed up thing I have ever heard from a child. My older brother is not much to be desired. He has 6 kids from 4 women. It's always a tough situation because his kids are all over, and the women are almost impossible to deal with. But I was trying to make an effort with his older daughters, at the time 7, 8, 6. I had them stay the night at our house one night. My son was 4 and playing upstairs with the 6-year-old. I come upstairs to check on them. I get to the door and, being the curious type, just listened. Little girl to my son, "Let's get under the blanket naked." My son, "No, why, little girl?" "Because it would feel so good to be naked with you." I told her mother the next day, but it made me sad to wonder what that poor girl has been through to have that thought process. Story 55. Not a teacher, but I've heard plenty of freshmen and sophomores talk about how they're going to go do cocaine later. Makes me glad I'm not a freshman or sophomore. I'm also pretty sure that the coaches, or at least substances test administrators, were corrupt because nobody ever failed them. Like, oh, Max got busted for green stuff and having a fake ID over in Austin. Will he still be able to play football on Friday? Oh, good. Story 56. I stumbled upon a dorm room a few doors from my own, where several male students were leaving the room after gang raping a young woman who sat weeping on the floor searching for her bloody underwear. I retrieved her underwear for her and tried to help her up when her girlfriend arrived, who had been searching for her, and walked with her out the door. They refused my further help and my suggestion that we contact the police or dormitory authorities. A short time later, the girl's brother arrived, wearing thick leather gloves, pounding one fist into his hand as he asked me where the guys were that attacked his sister. I showed him the room, which was now empty, the boys having fled. I almost got beat up just being in the vicinity of the crime, but the brother let me go when he understood I had tried to help. I can't think of anything worse than a man violating the private, tender sanctity of a woman. I am a selfish man myself, but I would not ever force myself on a woman. I have some empathy and compassion, although I am selfish in many other ways. Story 57. Obligatory. I was the student the teacher heard it from. I was in health class one day, and the teacher was lecturing about intimacy-transmitted diseases. I was really uneducated about intimacy and had recently been seeing this girl. We had hooked up a few times and hadn't used condoms. So I asked the teacher if it was normal to have large purplish, bluish brown marks all over your body having intimacy. The teacher said no, and that it probably wasn't from any intimacy-transmitted diseases. She was right. I went to Planned Parenthood later that week, and it turns out they weren't intimacy-transmitted diseases. They were just bruises from my dad beating me with his set of jumper cables. Story 58. Not a teacher, but my math teacher literally told me this yesterday. It was about 12 years ago, and apparently one kid didn't get the memo that you aren't supposed to read inappropriate things in class. But he could read magazines in class. You can tell where this is going, can't you? So my math teacher walks over to the kid, whispers in his ear that he should go to the principal's office, and then calls his parents. He was reading Playboy.